Somewhere in Paris, in the fall of 2023, a woman stepped onto a stage alone. No group behind her. No matching outfits. No synchronized choreography built for four. Just her, Lalisa Manobal, in front of a crowd that had no idea what they were about to witness. The clips spread across the internet in hours. Not through a press release. Not through a coordinated YG announcement. Just fan footage, shot through phone cameras, catching something raw and unscheduled feeling, even though it was anything but. That moment broke something open. Not a scandal, not a crisis. Something quieter than that, and somehow more significant. Because here was 1/4 of the biggest girl group in K-pop history, and she looked completely at home without the other three. So what exactly was Lisa building while the world waited for BLACKPINK to come back? Before this video ends, you are going to understand 4 things that most casual BLACKPINK fans have never fully pieced together. First, you are going to understand exactly what the end of the Born Pink era actually meant for Lisa specifically. Not the group. Lisa. What the tour's final night really signaled about where she was headed next, and why the timing of everything that followed was not accidental. Second, you are going to learn what Lisa was actually doing during what many fans call her year away from BLACKPINK activities. The answer is not what most people assume. This was not a rest period. This was not a gap year. This was construction. Third, you are going to understand what her label moves, her brand partnerships, and her creative choices during that period reveal about how she sees herself now, and how different that picture looks from the Lisa the world first met in 2016. And fourth, you are going to sit with the question that every BLACKPINK fan is quietly asking but nobody seems willing to answer directly. Is the relationship between Lalisa Manobal and BLACKPINK as a group the same as it was before the hiatus? And if not, what exactly does that mean for the future of this group? Stay with this, because the full picture is more interesting and more human than any of the headlines suggested. 1. The last chapter. To understand where Lisa is now, you need to go back to where BLACKPINK was at its absolute peak. September 16th, 2022. YG Entertainment drops Born Pink, BLACKPINK's second studio album. It debuts at #1 in 51 countries. The lead single, Pink Venom, had already broken records before the album even landed. Its music video accumulating tens of millions of views within its first 24 hours, a metric that had become almost routine for this group, but still staggering in its raw scale. BLACKPINK, at this point in 2022, was not just a K-pop act. They were a global cultural infrastructure. Brand partnerships with Chanel, Bulgari, Celine, MAC Cosmetics, a Coachella headlining slot that drew over 100,000 people across 2 weekends. A YouTube subscriber count that made them the most subscribed music act on the platform. By nearly every measurable metric, they were the biggest girl group in the world. And Lisa was the center of gravity for a very specific part of that success. As BLACKPINK's main dancer and lead rapper, Lisa had always been the member whose individual performance clips traveled farthest internationally. Her concert solos stopped shows. Her footwork, her stage presence, the controlled precision of her movement. Fans who had never listened to a single K-pop song in their lives would encounter a Lisa performance clip and become immediately invested. She had that specific kind of magnetism that cannot be manufactured or trained into someone. Either the camera finds you or it doesn't. The camera always found Lisa. Her 2021 solo debut only amplified it. Lalisa, the title track from her EP of the same name, broke the record for the biggest debut music video by a solo K-pop artist at the time, accumulating over 73 million views in its first 24 hours. Money, the B-side, became a genuine crossover phenomenon. TikTok ubiquity, commercial placement, the kind of cultural penetration that happens once in a generation for a K-pop solo track. When people who were not K-pop fans encountered Money, a meaningful number of them went looking for more. So when the Born Pink World Tour kicked off in October 2022, a run that would eventually span North America, Europe, Asia, and Oceania, Lisa was performing to arenas of 15,000 to 20,000 people per night as part of a unit that had become something close to untouchable in popular music. But watch the tour timeline carefully. There are details embedded in those dates that matter enormously for everything that followed. The Born Pink World Tour ran from October 2022 through July 2023. 8 months, dozens of cities, hundreds of thousands of tickets sold. The final concerts, held in Seoul at the KSPO Dome that September, functioned as a closing ceremony of sorts for the entire era. The 4 members performed together. They reflected on what they had built. The fandom responded the way fandoms always respond to endings they can feel coming, with a particular combination of celebration and grief, fully present in the moment because they understood it was ending. What nobody announced was what came next. YG Entertainment did not immediately reveal a timeline for a new BLACKPINK album, no comeback date, no group content schedule. The members began to disperse, Jisoo into acting, Jennie into fashion world appearances, and the early architecture of her own creative ventures rose into solo music work that would eventually land her at Atlantic Records. And Lisa flew to Paris. That detail, small on its surface, would become significant. Because Paris was not a vacation. Paris was a signal. And the people paying close attention to Lisa's movements during those months read it differently than the ones simply waiting for the next YG announcement. Something had shifted. The question was whether it was temporary or permanent. 2. The silence. In K-pop, silence has a grammar. When an idol goes quiet, no content drops, no scheduled appearances, no behind-the-scenes footage from their management company, the silence itself tells a story. It usually means one of two things: they are resting or they are negotiating. After the Born Pink era closed, Lisa's relationship with YG Entertainment entered what multiple industry observers described, carefully, as a period of transition. The public reporting at the time was fragmented. Rumors circulating through K-pop media about contract renewals, agency affiliations, and the specific terms under which each BLACKPINK member would navigate their individual futures. Clear answers were scarce. The speculation was not. What we can confirm: Lisa did not renew her exclusive solo management contract with YG Entertainment in the same structure as before. She established her own company, LLOUD Company, a move that, in the context of the Korean entertainment industry, signals something very deliberate. Artists who form their own labels are not stepping back from their careers. They are stepping forward into a level of control they previously did not possess. What we can also confirm: the 4 BLACKPINK members did negotiate and sign an amended group contract with YG, a hybrid structure that allowed for individual career activities under separate management while preserving the possibility of BLACKPINK unit activities. This kind of arrangement was relatively unusual for a YG act of their scale, and it reflected a new reality. 4 women at the peak of their individual market value were no longer operating under the same conditions as when they debuted as teenagers in 2016. But during the months between the Born Pink tour's close and Lisa's first major solo announcements, there was quiet. Fan communities filled that quiet with everything they had. Theories spread across Reddit threads and fan platforms. Some interpreted Lisa's sparse social media presence as a sign of internal friction within the group. Others pointed to her appearances at Paris Fashion Week as evidence that her pivot toward a European-facing career was already well underway. Posts dissected the backgrounds of her Instagram photos for coordinates: what city she was in, what brand the clothes were, who she might be meeting with. This is what parasocial culture does with uncertainty. It constructs meaning from fragments. Sometimes those constructions are accurate. Often they are projections. What we know, in retrospect, is that a significant portion of the silence was strategic. Lisa was not absent. She was unavailable in the way that people are unavailable when they are doing something important and not yet ready to announce it. The machinery of a solo career relaunch at her scale, label negotiations, creative direction, visual identity work, brand deal restructuring, does not happen publicly. It happens in rooms that cameras do not enter. One moment did break through publicly during this period, and it did so loudly. Lisa's appearance at the Crazy Horse Cabaret in Paris in October 2023. A series of performances at one of the most iconic and historically specific performance venues in the world. No formal major label press release. No coordinated rollout. It landed in the news cycle the way things do when they are not designed for the news cycle, with the specific friction of something unexpected, arriving on its own terms. The response was divided in the way that genuine artistic decisions tend to divide audiences. Some fans celebrated it as evidence of Lisa's artistic independence and range, a reminder that her performance credentials extend far beyond K-pop choreography. Others were uncertain. This was a different register than the BLACKPINK they had followed, and the ambiguity of the moment left room for every interpretation. But here is what the Crazy Horse moment actually confirmed. Regardless of anyone's opinion about the artistic choice itself, Lalisa Manobal was making decisions that were entirely her own. Not YG decisions. Not decisions shaped by how they would land for a group identity. Hers. And that, more than any contract announcement, any industry rumor, or any carefully managed public statement, was the real signal from those months of apparent quiet. She wasn't waiting. She was deciding. Here is what most people watching from the outside still did not understand. The thing that the official announcements, the fan theories, and the Fashion Week photos had all collectively obscured. What Lisa was actually building was larger than any single performance, any single partnership, or any single moment of viral attention. And to see the full scale of it, you have to look at everything at once. 3. What Lisa was actually building. While the world waited for BLACKPINK to reconvene, Lalisa Manobal was executing a career reconstruction that, viewed in retrospect, looks less like a solo detour and more like a long-planned second act. The LLOUD company founding was the foundation. An independent label and creative company gave Lisa something she had not had since she left Thailand as a teenager to audition at YG: structural ownership of her own career. Every creative decision, every partnership, every visual she put into the world, it ran through a company she controlled. That is not a minor distinction. In the architecture of the music industry, who controls the company that controls your output is the entire game. The RCA Records deal followed. RCA, a Sony music label whose roster has included Alicia Keys, $AP Rocky, and a growing number of artists operating at the intersection of global pop and hip-hop, was a significant signal. This was not a boutique independent deal sized for the existing K-pop fanbase. This was infrastructure. Distribution, promotion, and marketing reach calibrated specifically for the American and European markets that BLACKPINK had already opened for Lisa, but that she was now entering on her own terms, with her own leverage. Then came Rockstar. Released in June 2024, Rockstar was Lisa's first major official solo single under the new label structure. The song leaned into hip-hop and pop fusion with a directness that her BLACKPINK work had always hinted at but never fully delivered. Because BLACKPINK songs are constructed for 4 voices with sonic real estate divided accordingly. Rockstar was built for one. It had nowhere to share its focus, which meant all of its energy concentrated into a single presence. The music video accumulated over 100 million views within its first week, a number that, even accounting for the amplified metrics of the modern streaming era, marked a genuine cultural moment. More importantly, the sound and the visuals communicated something specific. Lisa was not attempting to make a BLACKPINK song with 3 voices removed. She was making something that could only exist as Lisa. The distinction matters more than the chart position. New Woman, her collaboration with Rosalia released in summer 2024, added a dimension that the Rockstar rollout could not accomplish alone. Pairing with Rosalia, one of the most critically respected and genre-defying artists working in contemporary pop, was not a random booking. Rosalia sits at the intersection of Spanish flamenco tradition, reggaeton, and avant-garde pop construction. The collaboration placed Lisa in a context that said, "This artist belongs in conversation with the most forward-thinking voices in global music." Not as a K-pop export seeking crossover, as a peer with equal footing. The brand portfolio during this period was equally calculated. Lisa had always been one of the most commercially valuable members of BLACKPINK in terms of individual endorsements. Her Thai background and her enormous following across Southeast Asia made her uniquely valuable for luxury brands seeking to reach that market at scale. But the brand moves during her year away from BLACKPINK activities were different in tone from what came before. Collaborations that emphasized creative directorship rather than simple ambassadorship. Campaigns where she was framed as an auteur, someone with a perspective on the work, rather than as a face affixed to a product. The distinction matters because it reflects how she was positioning herself in the market, not as a K-pop idol who happens to model for luxury brands, but as a creative entity who selects the brands that align with a vision. There is something worth pausing on here that goes beyond the industry math. Lisa left Thailand at 14 years old. 14. To pursue a career that, statistically, had almost no chance of materializing. The YG trainee system is famously demanding: years of training, relentless evaluation, the constant possibility of elimination. She navigated that system. She debuted in a group that exceeded every reasonable expectation, and she spent the formative years of her adult life operating within the constraints that come with being part of a highly managed, globally marketed pop act. Constraints that come with real trade-offs, even when the outcome is historic success. The period she spent inside BLACKPINK was not a cage, but it was a frame. Every frame shapes what you see. What Lisa did during her year away, methodically, quietly, with the same precision she applies to every physical performance she has ever given, was step outside the frame and see what she looked like without it. What she looked like was formidable. The numbers support that reading. The creative partnerships support it. The response from an international music market that has no particular attachment to K-pop, but found itself gravitating toward what Lisa was producing, supports it most of all. The Lisa who emerged from the closing ceremonies of the Born Pink era was not diminished by the absence of a group context. She was clarified by it. 4. The BLACKPINK question. And now we arrive at the question that every version of this conversation eventually reaches. Is Lisa still BLACKPINK? And what does BLACKPINK look like, if it still exists as a meaningful creative unit, with 4 members whose individual trajectories have diverged so significantly from the path they shared through 2023? Honest analysis here requires holding multiple things as true simultaneously. What we know about the formal structure, BLACKPINK's group contract with YG Entertainment has been renewed, in amended form. YG has confirmed across multiple statements and investor communications that BLACKPINK activities remain a part of the company's forward calendar. The group is not legally dissolved. The brand is not officially dormant. What we also know, Jennie has LLOUD Atelier, her own creative company, and a separate management structure. Jisoo has an acting career operating under Blissu. Rose is signed to Atlantic Records as a solo artist. Lisa has LLOUD Company and RCA Records. 4 members. 4 separate management entities. 4 distinct creative visions being actively developed in parallel. The question of what happens when these 4 converge again under the BLACKPINK name is genuinely complicated, and should not be flattened into a simple will they or won't they narrative. In the longer history of K-pop, groups that have taken extended hiatuses while members built individual careers have come back in a range of configurations. Some returned stronger than before. Some functionally dissolved while maintaining a technical group status. Some moved into what might be called an event model, existing less as a sustained working unit and more as an occasional cultural occasion. Industry analysts who follow the K-pop market have framed BLACKPINK's current position along those lines. Rather than operating on the album cycle tour repeat rhythm of a traditional pop act, BLACKPINK may be trending toward a model where the group convenes for specific, high-value moments, a historic concert, a milestone anniversary release, a project that only carries the weight it needs to carry when all 4 women are in the room together. This model exists elsewhere in music, and it works. Think of certain legacy rock acts whose members spend most of their calendar as solo artists but reconvene for tours that sell out stadiums in under an hour. The group identity remains potent precisely because it is not diluted by constant output. Scarcity generates gravity. For BLACKPINK, 2026 marks a decade since their debut. A 10-year anniversary, for a group at their scale and with their documented cultural footprint, is not a date that passes quietly in the Korean entertainment industry. It is an occasion with its own architecture. What form that occasion takes, whether it is a concert, an album, a documentary, some combination, remains unannounced. But the conditions for a meaningful reunion moment exist, and the emotional weight of a 10th anniversary would carry with it everything that came before. From Lisa's perspective specifically, and this is the part that requires the most careful thinking, the question is what BLACKPINK adds to her identity now versus what it added in 2022. At that point, the group was the primary scaffolding of her global platform. The audience she reached, the industry doors that opened, the brand value that accrued, it all ran through BLACKPINK first. Now she has her own label, her own major label deal, chart-performing solo releases, and collaborations with artists whose credibility exists entirely outside the K-pop ecosystem. She does not need BLACKPINK in the same way she once did. But that is a fundamentally different statement from saying she does not want it. And this is where the human dimension of this story matters in a way that is easy to skip past when you are focused on industry analysis. Lisa, Jisoo, Jennie, and Rose trained together for years before they ever debuted publicly. They were teenagers navigating the YG system together. They moved through the specific, unusual pressures of global K-pop stardom together. The media scrutiny, the parasocial fan culture, the gap between public persona and private person. The physical proximity of years of shared work. That kind of history does not evaporate because label contracts restructure. Fan sentiment, tracked across multiple platforms during this period, reflects something important. Devoted Lisa solo fans, the ones who follow LLOUD's announcements, stream the RCA releases, attend the individual concerts, are not, by and large, hoping BLACKPINK ceases to exist. They want both. They want the individual artist and the reunion. They are entirely capable of holding that complexity, and their sophistication as an audience should not be underestimated. There is a version of this story, not guaranteed, not announced, but internally consistent with everything that has happened, where Lisa's year away from BLACKPINK activities was not a departure from the group, but a preparation for a return on entirely new terms, where 4 members, each having established individual market weight and creative conviction, come back to a shared context with more to offer than they had before. A group where every member arrives with leverage, with a career that does not depend on the group for its survival. Where the choice to be BLACKPINK is exactly that, a choice. That version, if it materializes, would be unlike any iteration that existed during the Born Pink era. Different in power. Different in what it means when they stand together. And possibly, just possibly, more interesting than anything that came before. The video started in Paris. A woman alone on a stage, no choreography designed for 4, just herself and the audience in front of her. That image is worth returning to now, not as a metaphor for leaving something behind, but for something more precise. For what becomes visible when someone who has spent years performing within a specific frame is finally standing in a space large enough to show you what they actually contain. What BLACKPINK gave Lisa, and what Lisa gave BLACKPINK, is not erased by solo careers, label restructuring, or years of independent activity. The music exists. The tours happened. The records are real. That chapter is complete in the way that meaningful chapters are complete, not terminated, but finished. Something you return to with full knowledge of what it cost and what it was worth. What comes next is genuinely uncertain and genuinely interesting. Lalisa Manobal, solo artist, label founder, the woman who moved through her year away from BLACKPINK with the same deliberate precision she has always brought to every performance, is not done building. Whatever she builds next, whether it includes 3 specific women standing beside her or not, will be built on a foundation she owns. That matters. It matters in a way that goes beyond chart positions or streaming numbers or industry analysis. It matters because she is someone who left home at 14 to chase a possibility, and who has spent the decade since proving, quietly and then loudly, that the possibility was real. Whatever comes next from Lalisa Manobal is worth watching. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe so you are here for the next one. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where do you think Lisa goes from here, and what does a BLACKPINK reunion look like in a world where every member has built something of their own? The next video is already in production. The story keeps moving. Always Lalisa.